All right, so I'm going to walk through how to do the 3.3 grouped data table that we had from the notes. So if we just start, just get rid of all of this, sorry. If we just start here, I have made a column for the lower limit and the upper limit for each of our classes. This is as if you don't already have the class width. To find the class width, you're just taking the average, so it equals average of these two cells. So when we close that up, it will give us 62.5. Again, a lot of you asked me, how do you round? It's these buttons here. It might be giving you more numbers. So if you want more decimals or less decimals, you can choose that. But of course, we want to do this class uh, midpoint for all of the classes. So I'm going to copy that formula down all the way so that it creates all of my class midpoints. My frequencies came from the table themselves, so if you didn't already have this written down somewhere, you would just tally up the number of each of these. So we had 1, 0, 7, 10, 5, 4, 13, 4, 5, 0, and 1. Again, if you didn't know this, this is when you would look at the data and actually tally up the frequencies of each of these. We know we're going to need the sum of these frequencies, so I'm going to go ahead and do the sum of all of this data. So I have my 50 frequency observations. The sample mean for this, from this group data, I forgot because we had extra things here. So to do that, we're doing xi times fi. So we are going equals, this is the cell for x sub I, times, I got that times by going shift 8 times d2. Now I want this for all of this data, so I'm going to drag it all the way down. But we also want the sum of this data, so I can press equals the sum of all of this data. And so we have the two sums, we have the sum of our frequencies and the sum of our frequencies times our class midpoints. The formula for sample mean, x bar, is found by taking the sum of xi times fi and dividing it by the number of observations. So we have our sample mean. Now we need our sample mean to be able to figure out our sample standard deviation. So I'm going to copy this cell over into the first column of x bar, because it is x bar. So I'm going to click and boom. But I want that same number to be listed in every row since I'm going to use it for every row. So I'm going to let this cell be equal to the one above it, and it's going to copy 182.5. If I keep that formula going, I'm just copying essentially 182.5 all the way down. The only reason I didn't just straight up copy paste this is because I wanted to be able to have it as a formula so that if I messed up somewhere, I could just plug it in. The next thing we need is x sub I minus x bar. So I'm going to do x sub I minus x bar. That's not the right formula. Let me try that again. C2 minus F2, and I'm going to copy that formula all the way down by dragging down the little corner of the Excel bar. So the next column, what I want is I want to square each of the x sub I minus x bar, the differences. So we're going to do equals this cell squared, so it squares the entire column. Boom. And then we're going to multiply this by the frequency. Now my frequency, remember, is in this column D. That's why I like to label mine. So if we multiply by the frequency and then drag that all the way down, we have all of these values. Now, formula wants me to sum these, so I'm going to do equals the sum of this entire column, and I'm going to divide that by 1 less than the sample. Now my sample has 50 in it. How do I know that? It's right here. 50 observations, so I'm going to divide by 49. And my sample standard deviation is simply the square root of that value, SQRT of I14, and then boom, 54.16. I think when I did this the first time, it was giving me a bunch of decimals, and I might have toned it back to 1 decimal. We're representing money here, so it is kind of makes sense to leave it as 2 decimals. Just make sure you read your question to see how it wants you to round your numbers. So formulas I used is square root, I used dividing, I used the sum formula a lot, and then just basically followed the top titles, which is why I like to title all of mine.